Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are breaking down a really fascinating article that connects a Marvel supervillain to, believe it or not, a hidden war shaping America. It's a complex argument for sure, touching on everything from theology to social media. All right, let's dive right in. So the whole thing kicks off with that really simple question, the one kids always ask during a movie. And it uses one of the biggest villains in recent memory, Thanos, to unpack a much deeper idea about how we actually define good and evil. Okay, so let's just think about Thanos for a second. His backstory is incredibly traumatic, right? He predicts this total catastrophe, nobody listens to him, and he ends up being one of the only survivors. His motivation? It's actually to stop anyone else from going through that. But his method? Well, it's about as catastrophic as it gets. And that creates this paradox. The guy trying to stop the end is near literally becomes the end that everyone's afraid of. So, what it all boils down to, and this is the crucial point the author makes right from the jump, is this. Your intentions, your sad backstory, none of that is enough. At the end of the day, our actions and our choices are what define us. And this idea of choice, well, that's the engine that drives the rest of this entire argument. Okay, so this is where we get to the core of it. The author argues that this exact same concept of choice is playing out in a much bigger and mostly unrecognized conflict. And to see it, the author says we need to shift our lens away from just politics and look at theology instead. According to this source, the political chaos we see every single day, the constant left versus right battle, that isn't the real war. It's actually just a symptom. The author makes the bold claim that the actual fight is a much deeper theological split that's happening inside of Christianity itself. So the author breaks this down into two competing camps. On one side, you have what's called Logos Christianity. This view sees Christ as fulfilling all the biblical promises, which then allows for a moral, just war critique of any political state. But then on the other side, you've got Christian Zionism, which sees the modern state of Israel as the literal fulfillment of divine prophecy. And if its actions are part of God's plan, well then criticizing them becomes nearly impossible. So how does the author even begin to support a claim that big? Well, the source lays out 4 key points, which it calls interlocking truths, to build its case. And these 4 points are really the foundation of the whole thing. First, the idea that theology, not politics, is what's really in the driver's seat. Second, the absolute importance of Imago Dei, this idea of the human soul. Third, that free speech is the essential firewall that even allows this debate to happen. And finally, and this is where it gets really interesting, that this exact same spiritual battle is now being fought on the brand new turf of artificial intelligence. Let's dig into that second point. This concept of Imago Dei. It's the idea that every single person has a soul and inherent dignity because they're made in God's image. The author argues that when you remove this idea, when you take the soul out of the equation, people stop being people. They just become data points, things to be managed or engineered. And this table here, it illustrates that point perfectly. Look at these different systems, from Marxism to secular tech. Each one has a mask, right? A promise, like class equality or progress. But according to this text, when you strip away the concept of the individual soul, the reality, the outcome, becomes something totally different. It becomes elite control, or what the author calls biodigital convergence. So you see, the author frames this whole conflict not as a political choice between left or right, but as something way more fundamental. The question is, are we choosing to value the inherent dignity of the individual soul, or are we prioritizing the goals of the system? Okay, so how does all this big, abstract stuff connect to our everyday lives? Well, the author brings it right down to something we've all experienced, online rage bait. And you're gonna love this connection. The author argues that this thing we call rage bait, it's not some new invention of the internet. Oh no. In fact, the source claims the original act of rage bait happened all the way back in the Garden of Eden. In this telling, the serpent doesn't just show up and issue a command. It starts with a whisper. It creates dissatisfaction, a sense of boredom, and it hints that there's a secret that Eve isn't in on. It's that classic setup to make someone feel like they're missing out. And here's the killer move, the insinuation of deceit. The serpent plants that little seed of doubt, suggesting Adam knows something she doesn't, that he's keeping a secret from her. It's designed to completely bypass rational thought and hit you right in the emotions. A textbook tactic. And that, right there, is the link to our world. The author argues that this ancient whisper is exactly what we're seeing online today. It's just that now, the role of the serpent is played by algorithms, by bots, and sometimes by other people, all whispering things designed to inflame our emotions and turn us against each other. So, all of this leads us to the author's conclusion. And to frame the ultimate stakes of all these choices we've been talking about, they use one final, powerful biblical parable from the Gospel of Matthew. And the parable is incredibly clear. At the final judgment, everyone is separated into two groups, the sheep and the goats. But look at the criteria. It's not about what they believed or who they voted for or how important they were. It is based entirely on their tangible actions. Did you help people in need or did you not? Simple as that. Now, the author uses this quote to really challenge the idea of any political figure being Christ-like. The argument here is that humans should stop trying to force some kind of heavenly outcome here on Earth. That phrase, immanentize the eschaton, sounds really complicated, but it just means trying to build heaven on Earth by our own power. And the point is, that's not our job. According to this text, that job belongs to God alone. And with this final thought, everything comes full circle. We're back to Thanos, our pop culture villain from the beginning, but now he's cast as one of the goats from the parable. In the end, it all just boils down to choice. Thanos could have chosen to do good, but instead he chose destruction. And it leaves us with a pretty heavy question to consider. What about our own choices? Do they align more with the sheep or with the goats?